Hi, this is Jeanette Comerford, and this is the second video in my mini Halloween card series. Today, I won't be showing you how I put this card together. Rather, I'm going to be showing you a little bit behind the scenes, how I stamped out the images and colored a few of them for the entire series. I'm using Copic Express It paper with Memento Tuxedo Black ink. This is the best ink that you can use if you're coloring with Copics because you don't get any smearing or smudging. Now, I had in mind roughly the number of cards I was going to be making, and I had an idea of the little scenes that I was going to create. But of course, you're never sure until you actually start creating the card what stamped images you're going to need. And so I stamped multiples of each image. So that gives me options when I get down to creating the card. If I decide I'm going to change one image for another, then it's already stamped out and ready for me. So you can see with the moon and the gravestones, I stamped out quite a few of those because I probably will be using them on many of the cards. And for the tombstones, I'll probably be using more than one on each card. I don't know if you saw me, but as I stamp and I'm finished with the little stamp, the clear stamp, I wipe it with a baby wipe and I replace it onto the acrylic paper. I find that that way I keep track of my stamps and I'm not going to lose them. This stamp, I've never stamped it before. It's a brand new stamp. And so you saw that I stamped it off on a piece of scrap paper first, just to make sure that it was stamping properly. Sometimes with the clear stamps, there's a bit of residue on them. And so the first time you ever stamp the stamp, it's not always a clear image. So I always have a piece of scrap paper and I stamp it off on that first. So here I'm going to be showing you how I colored the little cat. I used a series of cool grays. This is C3, which is going to be my lightest color. And I'm starting to put it in the areas where I'm going to have my darkest shading. So I color from light to dark and then dark to light. This gives me a good idea of where my shadows are going to go, and if I decide to change my mind or I don't like it, it's much easier to fix if I've only laid down the light color. This is C5, so slightly darker, and I'm going over my coloring with that. It's starting to blend in the paper already. I'll go back with my C3 and blend out any harsh lines. With little images like this, you have to be careful not to oversaturate your paper because the ink will sort of seep past those lines. And especially if you're using the coordinating die cuts, it leaves a little sort of rim of white around the image, so you don't want any of your coloring to seep past that. Now I have C7, which is going to be my darkest color for this cat. I'm using a little bit less of that and really just adding it to the areas where I want my deepest shadow. And what I like about having the images all stamped out, if you want to go ahead and color the other cat at the same time, you can. It is a real time saver. So I'm just blending out now with that C5, getting rid of the harsh lines, and you can really start to see the little cat coming to life now. Now I've got my C3 still blending away. I'm leaving that area in the middle white still because I want that to be my lightest area, so I only want to color over that once. So any areas I'm leaving white will be where my highlight is going to end up. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a little more C5 just because it got a little too light. So I'm going to add a little bit deeper shadow there, and then I'll blend it out again with the C3. I'm actually deciding to use C1 for the middle of the cat's face. I thought the C3 was going to end up being too dark, so I added the C1 instead, and I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I'm going to go ahead now with R20, add a little bit of that to the ears, to the cheeks, and the nose. Where I added it to the cheeks, I will blend over it again with C1, and then my cat is finished. For these tombstones, because they're so small, I am going to go ahead and color them all at the same time. So just coloring them all with the same markers in the exact same way. That was W1 that I used. This is W3, I believe. I had the caps put out around the side, but I had my camera zoomed too far in so you can't actually see them. So here we go. So again, just really quickly, I'm not overly worrying about the blending at this point. So I think what I had started off with was W00, then W1, and now this is W3. So again, this is my darkest color, and I'm just sort of putting it around the edges. Now I'll be blending out with my W1. Then I'll grab my W00, and I'm still leaving an area uncolored. And what I'm going to do with that, once I'm done with this, is I'm just going to take my colorless blender and I'll just blend out the harsh lines and leave those edges in the right uncolored. So that'll be my highlight for the gravestones. So you'll see me do that in just a minute. So you can see that if you have a bunch of small images, how much faster it is if you color them all at the same time. So here I am now grabbing my colorless blender, and I will go over those edges with it, soften it up. Again, I'm not being too careful. And that's the end of this video, so thank you very much for watching it. Here are the supplies for the cat card that I showed you at the beginning.